This week's Farm Basics is brought to you by satshot.com. Satellites aren't just for NASA anymore. Use the power of satellite imagery to create variable rate management zones in your fields. To reduce input costs and increase yields on your farm, go to satshot.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to talk a little about spring corn harvest. Ooh, that doesn't sound very fun.
I don't know, something about that just didn't quite sound right, but unfortunately that is the case for many farmers across the country this year. There's some corn still in the field that with all the winter snowfall, and farmers just weren't able to get it out of the field. So you have to deal with it in the spring, and that does bring about some different challenges.
Okay, well, let's just talk about how we ended up with this problem in the first place. Here's what happened during the year of 2009. It was really cold all across the country. I mean, everywhere you went, farmers were talking about how cold it was. Well, when the weather is cold, crops like corn don't mature as quickly as normal. See, crops like corn, they mature based on heat units. So the quicker we can get a certain amount of heat in total throughout the course of the whole summer, the quicker that plant will mature. So just a couple years ago, a lot of farmers were harvesting their corn in mid-September. Well, this year, a lot of farmers were harvesting their corn in mid-November, or unfortunately, well into December, and then the snow hit and then their combines couldn't go anymore.
And when we talk about delaying maturity, normally corn is maturing in September and into October for much of the Corn Belt. Well, this year, during that time period, it was raining and it was really cold. So the corn was not able to mature how it normally did. And when we talk about maturity, it gets to its physiological maturity, and then corn is still at about 35% moisture and needs to dry down to about 15% moisture in those corn kernels in order for farmers to be able to store it in bins.
But here's the whole problem. Farmers can go out there and they can harvest that corn before it gets down to 15% moisture. What they can do is they can run it through what they call grain dryers. Well, a lot of the farmers in mid-October, when they normally would be rolling hard on corn, a lot of that corn was 30% moisture or more. So the cost to dry it down literally was more than a lot of these farmers would earn in a normal year on a per acre basis. I mean, $100, $150, even $200 an acre, some of these farmers were spending on drying costs, and that's just way too much. So when they started running the numbers on this, they decided, ooh, I don't think I want to spend $200 an acre and lose $100 an acre net. I think I'll just let it stand in the field and hopefully naturally dry down a little more so I don't have to spend money to dry it.
Now there are some years where corn actually does dry down over the winter, and you may harvest it in the early spring, and that corn is down to 15 to 20% moisture, and you can actually get some decent grain out of it. This year may be an exception for some farmers because the early frost came this year. Well, it wasn't necessarily early by the calendar, but based on the heat units, since we didn't accumulate much heat during the summer, the corn wasn't to maturity yet. We got some killing frosts, and all of a sudden that corn was at 40 or 45% moisture in the field. It probably won't get back down to 15 to 20 where we want it to be, and certainly the kernels won't be in that good a condition.
But a lot of the corn that does get harvested this spring will be much drier than it was in the fall. So for a lot of farmers, you'd say, okay, well, let's just harvest it in the spring. Here are the problems with harvesting in the spring. First of all, a lot of the corn falls off or gets eaten by deer or other animals throughout the course of the winter. When that heavy snow pushes on that corn, a lot of times the corn plant will completely fall over, or the ear at least will fall on the ground. Once the ear's on the ground, it's lost. The farmer can't recover it. The next problem with spring harvest is normally farmers barely have enough time to get their crop planted in the spring. Now they add another big job in the spring of harvesting, so they have to harvest, then they have to get the field ready, then they have to get it planted, and they have to do all that in the same amount of time where they would normally just plant. So what I'm saying is farmers really are praying that they're going to have a great spring weather-wise, nice and dry for 2 or 3 months, and then things could work out okay.
Well, the problem is now there's lots of snow that's been trapped in these cornfields. I mean, planted corn makes a great snow fence, so it kept all that moisture in the field. So farmers are looking for mornings where it's still frozen, where they can get out with the combine in the late evening and early morning and get that corn out while the ground is still firm enough to drive their combines through the field.
Well, spring harvest, spring corn harvest is certainly something that no farmer ever wants to see. And another thing no farmer ever wants to see is our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you how to stop it on your farm coming up later in the show.